What's going on, everybody? You're tuning in to part 2 of our adventures with King David. In this episode, we're going to learn much more what the fall of David really entailed and how did he lose his way along the way. This episode will be an extension about how we all can learn from the power of atonement, meaning correcting our mistakes and apologizing in a real way. I hope you're able to share this with your friends, family, kids who need to maybe understand the Bible, etc. This is meant for all parties trying to unpack these historical figures in a modern way. So I hope you enjoy the video. Please let me know what you think, and I hope to talk to you soon. Peace. We back in it again. So let's get into it today. Success through failure. I've learned from my mess ups even more than from my wins. So mess ups are great because they show us our blind spots, things we weren't thinking about. They show us our deficits, places we can improve. But your mistakes can also kill you more than anything. A bad flaw is worse than a good strength. It takes a lifetime to build a reputation, and it just takes seconds to destroy it. We're going to do a character spotlight today of a person who had great successes, but they also had egregious flaws. And that's none other than King David. David was a shepherd who at 15 years old became an employee of the king. So at the time, there's a war going on, and they're fighting Israel's fighting the Philistines. The Philistines have a bad mamma jamma on their roster. This man named Goliath. Now, Goliath was a giant, huge, definitely hard to beat and probably impossible to beat for a 15-year-old shepherd who could play the harp. Somehow, some way, through a divine calling, David was able to not only meet this challenge, but also see it through. On paper, David shouldn't have been a match for Goliath, but he found and channeled a source bigger than him, and he was allowed himself to be used for a purpose bigger than him. There's a verse in the Bible, 1 Samuel 16:7, and it says, "The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So when the pressure was on, under the brightest lights, David shone through, and I just think that's a beautiful thing. So shout out to Teen David. But one thing about David is his story doesn't end there, and we realize David is honorable, but this is not without flaws. So David defeats the Goliath, and he all of a sudden falls out of favor with the king. Maybe you've had this scenario. Maybe you've heard of scenarios. There's so many scenarios historically and in people's personal life where all of a sudden you start shining, and maybe the person higher up than you starts to feel some kind of way. Jealousy sinks in. You know, people maybe have whispers about David being the one, right? But Saul is the king, and it's hard. It's hard to be humble in general, but I gotta imagine it's really hard to be humble when you're a king, you know. And he wasn't humble, and he was trying to get David out of there. So there's a period of time in David's life where he's fleeing Saul. Time passes. Saul falls ill. David does become the king, and in that transition from him to teen to on the run to king, we're starting to see David evolve more and more into his greatness. So David is the king of Israel, and in this time, Israel actually becomes the most military and expansive as it ever does in its history. So with expansion, with military comes war, comes bloodshed. David was responsible for a lot of deaths through the name of this militarized expansion. And he also had slaves because they helped build and expand the empire. For me personally, what makes David, or what shows one of his most egregious flaws, was the story of Uriah the Hittite and Bathsheba. David is the king. His army is off to war, but for whatever reason, David does not go to war with his group. When they go out for this particular conquest, he doesn't go. So that, for me, that's a red flag one, because idleness is the devil's playground, which is another thing we say in church. The idle mind is the devil's playground. So through this idleness, he's already in a bad spot because he's chilling on his riches. Kind of like what somebody said earlier, he's successful. It's all good, no problem. And out in the gardens or the courtyards, or however you want to phrase it, he sees something he likes. He sees something he likes, and that is this woman named Bathsheba. The verse says he looks at her and he's like, oh, I like what I like.
So now the thing about Bathsheba, she's married. She's married to one of his top soldiers, Uriah. So Uriah's out working, putting in the work for Israel. You feel me? And King David at home, he's eyeing his wife. Not good. Not good at all, guys. So what does David do? He sees what he's like. He's the king. Again, humility is hard on anyone. Got to be hard for the king when you can have anything you want. So he ends up laying with Bathsheba. Bathsheba ends up being impregnated from this union of theirs. And that's obviously no good. So what he tries to do is he tries to get Uriah to come back home and just take a break and hopefully lay with his wife so that it just seemed like it's his kid, which is, whew. I mean, you see a lot on Facebook. You see a lot, all the sites. That's some tea. That's crazy work, if you ask me. So David tries to frame it in a way where it seems like it's Uriah's child, but Uriah doesn't go for that. There's another verse in the Bible when he says, my men are out there fighting. How can I lay back? And that just, again, speaks to honor and integrity. When your people are out there, maybe a sign of a good leader is somebody who is out there with them, making sure they're okay. And I know David was a shepherd. So in a sense, shepherds lead from the back because they need to make sure everybody gets there. But in this sense, David was in a different room altogether. So this actually makes David feel a little bit guilty as well, because here he is doing something he knows is not honorable. And he sees somebody doing something extremely honorable. And it's not good for his flow because he needs them to kind of cover up his own mistakes. And that's just something to unpack there. When you're not in your own power, but you see people in theirs, how it can also be a reflection of where you need to go. So sometimes our mistakes are illuminated by the strength of others. The strength of others can show us where we ourselves could boost things that we have going on in our life. Right? Because you may not always realize what your mistake is, but in this case of David, he knew he was wrong. And so for me, the accountability needs to be there because it's already accounted for. If you know right, you got to do right. And if you don't do right, you know you did wrong. And I'm not here to say what's good or bad for anybody, but within the context of his own moral code, he was at fault. And that's really what it comes down to. He knew he was wrong from the tenets of what makes right for David, right? So he's down bad for this. Gets worse, everybody. So what he does is he realizes he can't have Uriah stage that. So he sends Uriah to the front lines of a battle. And for those that, when you go to the front lines of the battle, it's pretty much guaranteed death. If you ever seen like any of those movies, Braveheart, Gladiator, what have you, the people charge out to the front, they're clipped first. He has him go up front, and then he has his army general to pull the other men back. So imagine you're running out with your team. We finna do this. You turn around and you the only one there. It's a done deal. So David really had him, in just modern terms, he backdoored Uriah. He betrayed Uriah. He did him dirty. However you want to slimed him out. He did it. He did Uriah dirty. And as a man and as a person, sure, but for me, I'm a man. So as a man, I was like, yo, how could the same boy who did so much for his nation, who stood through adversity, how did we get here? You know what I'm saying? How did we get here? And this same question of how do we get here plagues a lot of people when you realize you lost your way. You can lose your way, I feel, for a long time, but there can be a moment when you realize, wow, I've really strayed from where I started. And for David, this happened when a prophet, his name was Nathan, he came and basically told David he was wrong. Now, I don't know if you ever had the situation where like you had a friend, like maybe you feel like a certain way about something, but you have a friend and they're like, you're wrong, right? You're like, what? So Nathan walks down how he's wrong. Maybe David knew already. He kind of maybe felt that already he was wrong, right? But then when it's on the floor like that, he just has to acknowledge he's wrong. And this is where David's strength really shines, because David, like other kings, presidents, whoever, elected officials who maybe have a problem at times acknowledging their flaws, or even let alone trying to change it, David knew he was wrong and he apologized. And one thing about David is he was one of the greatest apology makers of all time. Through this wrongdoing with Bathsheba, Uriah, you find him uttering the famous phrase, "Create in me, God, a clean heart." Psalms 51:10. David knew how to atone for the things that he did wrong. He was accountable in the things that he did wrong. And he eventually, I guess, can you ever really make amends with someone who's lost a life? Probably not. But within what he needed to do for his life to move forward, he made that amends, and he went on to do great things. He goes on to continue to be a great king. He continues to expand Israel in an amazing way. He sets up his sons to also be great leaders, and he's responsible for the majority of the book of Psalms. The book of Psalms, which is, just a beautifully written, in my opinion, a beautifully written chapter. He's responsible for a lot of these Psalms. Psalms are like songs. You get a lot of the beautiful language of the Bible in these Psalms chapters. This comes from David. And also, the most important thing about David was he represents the bloodline that eventually births Jesus of Nazareth, which this whole way of life is contingent on. So the whole Bible contingent on the bloodline of Jesus. David is a descendant of that. Without David, you don't get Jesus. So even with the things that he's done wrong, you can't negate the value that he had moving forward. And a lot of times when people don't make amends, they don't apologize and atone, we can't get past the trauma of what they've done. But David was able to acknowledge his flaws, and through that, we're able to re-accept him. And through that, he's able to continue on with his work. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever had the misfortune of hurting someone that you've loved, or making a mistake in a way that was very harmful, but it can be very hard to get over that in your own mind. So in this moment, I want to talk about the processing of atonement. So when it comes to atonement, you have to do at least 4 A's. You have to acknowledge, you have to ask, you have to act, and you have to amend. When I say acknowledge, you have to come to it with no excuses. Acknowledge where the harm was done. Be fully accountable about it. Name it. Well, you know what happened. No, I hurt you in this way. This is what I did. And it can't be well, I did this, but you did that, so I had to do this. No, if they want to apologize, they can acknowledge that. But when it comes to apology, acknowledge where you're at. No excuses. Keep people off the defensive. Show that there is some level of remorse from the acknowledgement. All right. Then 2, ask. Consent to the course correction. What can we do about this? Do you mind if I try to fix this? Because sometimes people don't want to hear it from you. Sometimes it's better to give people space. But you should at least ask, is there a way that I can fix this? Or if you have a suggestion, is it okay that if I do this to fix it? Maybe take the pressure off them to come with all the suggestions. And if you have some that work, share them. But also be open to what they may need from it. What needs to be done to reconcile this harm? All right. 3rd, you need to act. You need to do it. Once they say what needs to be done, it can't be nah, I can't do that. You want me to do that? To apologize? I can't do that. I mean, if the reason that you can't do it is because it's going to have you have to be more accountable, maybe make it a public apology. It's going to have to make you ask more people for consent to heal, then you have to act on it if you want to really, I guess, fully encapsulate what it means to find atonement. And then last but not least, amend. When it comes to amend, the definition of amend is to make minor changes or tweaks to make things fairer or more accurate. You may do your best to act on an apology. You might feel good. Hey, apologize, we're good. And it may find out that the thing you did was not enough. So when you're making these minor changes, it's okay to come back after a week, a month, even a year. Hey, how are you feeling about this? I know some time has passed. Have you had a chance to think about it, et cetera, et cetera. Also, sometimes making an amend simply means I have to leave it alone. I acted in the way that they told me to act to atone for it, and now I need to take space. Because people's logic and people's emotion sometimes run different races. Somebody could logically know that you're in the wrong, but then emotionally it might take time for them to forgive you. If you ever had a friend, all right, I still love you. I'm mad at you, but I'm gonna let it go. And then maybe a day later, hey, what you doing today? That kind of situation. So sometimes it takes time for that apology to land. So you can't be eager to be everybody's friend again. You've messed up, you've apologized, and now you want everybody to love you how they loved you before. Sometimes these things take time, right? So again, you want to acknowledge, ask, act, and amend. And these are 4 simple steps to a powerful apology. I have a question for you all. I'd love for you guys to throw it in the chat. Atonement creates blank.
I am going to open up the floor for everyone. Please come off mute. The love that Quasi gave us, let us give that back to him 10 times fold.
Thank you for sharing
Thank you
your
so much.
beautiful
This
gifts
was
this
amazing
morning. I'm
for
so
sharing,
grateful.
Thank you.
Everybody,
pouring out.
Thank you,
today.
beloved. Thank you, family. Thank you, thank
You
you.
are wonderful.
Hey,
We
love you
appreciate
all.
Love you,
you.
Love
brother.
you all. Love
I
you,
love
beloved.
you.
More and
Thank you.
more.
Thank
Have a
you.
I'm
Thank
wonderful
you.
so
day.
grateful to be a
Keep up
part of
the
this
great
Your
work.
family.
hands
So
together.
grateful.
God
Thank you,
bless
thank
you.
you, thank you.
Wonderful.
Yes, indeed. Have a beautiful
Blessings.
day.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
All
I
Appreciate you.
never heard that story told like that. I was thoroughly entertained.
Appreciate it.
Yes, it was.